So good morning, everyone. I'm hoping y'all are okay and y'all are doing doing good so far. Today we're gonna be discussing 3D printing and we're also gonna be discussing a software. But before we do that, again, I just wanted to say good morning and I wanted to tell y'all a little bit about myself, like a quick intro. So who am I? My name is Bianca Bermudez. I am a makerspace technician here at the Ideastudio Makerspace at the West Houston Institute, located on A-Leaf Hayes. This is a picture of what it looks like. Um, so it's just a makerspace, and a makerspace is a place where you could utilize the resources to make your own academic or personal projects. And this is something that is completely at your disposal as students, faculty, or staff members at HCC at no cost to you. We have 3D printers, so we train you on how to use our 3D printers, so you could 3D print your own personal projects or your own academic projects. That's what they look like. So those black and orange ones, they're referred to as Prusas, and the orange and silver ones, those are like high-end 3D printers that use liquid resins. They're called Formlabs. Over here, we also have vinyl cutting at your disposal. So these students are making their Make Youth Count the Census T-shirts to distribute. So you could also make your own T-shirts in the lab. You also have like chances to attend workshops, and this is our program director, Jordan Carswell, and he's teaching a group of students how to use the laser cutter. So laser cutting is something that you could also do at the lab. There's various other workshops that are also at your disposal. Like this is our other technician, Mr. Jeffrey Chen. He's teaching a group of students and staff members how to use the soldering equipment to build their own digital clock. So that's a little intro into the background and the space. Today we're gonna be briefly discussing how 3D printers works and how we are going to obtain or create a model. So let me show you this video real quick of a time lapse of someone printing a baby Groot. So 3D printers, it's actually very basic technology. If you ever used a hot glue gun, so if you've used a hot glue gun, type in yes in the chat to see if you know what a hot glue gun is or you've heard of a hot glue gun. So Professor said yes. If you haven't, what I mean by a hot glue gun is like one of these things right here, where you put the glue stick in the back. So that's pretty much what a 3D printer is. It's just a very fancy hot glue gun, where instead of using the glue stick, you're using a spool of filament. And instead of you doing all the work, it's a bunch of finely tuned, like a bunch of little motors doing all the controlled actions. And that instead of you figuring out how to create the model, it's a program that is figuring out how to create the model for you. Like you saw in this time lapse, how it's doing it layer by layer, layer by layer. So that's how it creates the model. It goes like to the first layer, draws it out, goes to the second layer, draws it out, third layer, until it completes the final model. So very cool. Another way of thinking about 3D printing is like icing a cake. You have a bag of icing, and you're just piping that design all the way up. So that's 3D printing in a nutshell. There are two different ways to start 3D printing. You can obtain, like, by start, I mean mainly like getting your model. So one way is to obtain a 3D model, and there is a site referred to as Thingiverse, where we're gonna take a look at it real quick. So type Thingiverse.com, and this is what the site looks like. So this site kind of gives you inspiration on like a ton of different models that people have actually created and that they're sharing it with you. So you could probably 3D print, redesign, or give it your own flair. Like, let's say for example, I wanted to find a 3D print heart. I'll go to the search bar right here, type heart, and you can see all the different types of 3D models that all these people have created. So this is kind of an open source community sharing their ideas, sharing their models with you so that you can also generate ideas and print these ideas. So that's one site I wanted to share with you. So this is where you could obtain models. But let's say for example, you couldn't find the model that you were looking for, or you wanted to create something very specific. So what you're going to have to do is create your own model. So the most basic software that I've come across is something called Tinkercad. And this takes 3D modeling and kind of breaks it down and makes it very playful. There's two things to note about Tinkercad. Tinkercad is not a program that you can download. It's a web-based program. And I've discovered that it works specifically with Google Chrome. So don't use Tinkercad with Firefox or Internet Explorer. It doesn't work. So be sure to use Google Chrome when you're using Tinkercad. And another cool thing about Tinkercad is that it's completely free for everyone. And it's really easy to obtain an account. So if you can, I would recommend that you go to Tinkercad. So you're going to open up Google Chrome. And if you already have Google Chrome open, just open a new tab. Type Tinkercad, Tinkercad, in the search bar, and it should be the first link that appears. So if y'all could do that, I would highly recommend that y'all do that at this moment in time. You're going to click it, and this is what it looks like. And we're going to sign in. And the cool thing about Tinkercad is that you can actually sign in with your Gmail. So if you have a Gmail account, you could use that. You could also use your Facebook account if you have a Facebook account. And you could also sign in with your Microsoft account. So those of you who have an @Live or @Hotmail account can use that. You could also sign in with your Apple account. So those are the various ways you could sign in. And for those of you who are more advanced and probably have heard of something called AutoCAD, which is the more advanced 3D modeling program, you could sign in with that as well. I'm going to sign in with my Gmail account, so I'm going to click sign in with Google. Also, you could always stop me to ask a question. Here, let me sign out actually, so y'all can see the process. Let's see. I think I'm signed in because I wanted y'all to see that. So it'll ask you to sign in. If you sign in with Google, it'll ask you to type in your Gmail account. So whatever your Gmail is, mine is bianca.bermudez at gmail.com. click next. Enter your Gmail, whatever you use for your password for your Gmail account. And you automatically get your own account when you use your Gmail. Alright, so this is what it looks like. Like I mentioned before, it is web-based. So you're 3D modeling using the browser, which is pretty cool. So it automatically saves anything you 3D model. When you first log in, it'll ask you if you want to do the tutorial. It's up to you if you want to do it or not. It's just more information for you on how to use the Tinkercad software. But you could kind of jump in and create a new design. So we're going to click on this. And this is what it looks like. This is the interface. So you have something in front of you that's referred to as a work plane. This is also referred to as your grid. So this is where you will do your 3D modeling on. Over here is the name of the file. Because this is a web-based program, it automatically names your files for you. You could also change the name. We're going to do a quick keychain, so we could discuss other topics of this. You have something here called your view cube. So let me show you that later on. What I want to get to first of all is your basic shapes. So how Tinkercad works is kind of like how Minecraft. Has anyone heard of Minecraft? That game where you kind of build your own world. So it's kind of like that. That's how it works. You're using building blocks to create your 3D model. So you have like an array of basic shapes over here on your left hand side that you could select from. Like I'm going to select a box real quick. So I've selected a box and I'm going to put it somewhere on my work plane. And now I have a box. Something to note about the work plane. If you hover over like the white boxes, it gives you the dimensions of the box, and it says 20 by 20. Tinkercad automatically uses millimeters. So if you go over here, there's something called edit grid. So we're going to edit our grid and change the millimeters to inches. And it's telling you my grid is 7.87 by 7.87. I could also change my grid if I want to. Like I'll make it 8 by 8 and I could update the grid. Now my box is being displayed in inches. So let's say I wanted to make this 2 inches wide, and probably if I click the little box again, I'll type this to be 1 inch tall. So notice how I move the view. So I'm using my mouse to move around and look at this model in different angles by clicking the left button of the mouse. If you're using a traditional mouse, if you're using your laptop, which is the touchpad, you're gonna have to click the left button and use your other finger to move around the model. All right. Another way to view different angles is looking at this view cube and selecting the portion that you want to see. So I wanted to see the top part. This is the top view. I wanted to see an angle view. I click an angle, like one of the corners of the cube, to see that corner. If I want to see the front, I click front. I want to see this angle, I could click this angle. So that's how you use the view cube. Other things that to change your view is using the zoom in. So the plus sign zooms you in. The minus sign over here zooms you out. This is home view. So if you click that, it zooms out so you can see your entire work plane. This helps you switch from flat view to perspective. So if I click this, this is a flat view of the model. And if I click it again, this is a 3D view of the model. On your mouse, if you have a scroll wheel, you could use the scroll wheel to zoom in or zoom out. Okay? So that's a little bit on how to view your model. And if you have a mouse to pan, and what I mean by pan is like to grab it and move it, you're going to click on the scroll wheel, hold it, and move the mouse around. So those are the different ways you can view stuff. Let's go back to the model, the box. So I'm going to make a very simple keychain. And right now it's kind of too thick. I want to slim it. So I'm going to click this one. And I'm going to like make it thinner. So one way to make it thinner is by grabbing the white box and slowly decreasing the thickness of the model. I could also just type in what dimension that I want. Alright, so I made it thinner. Another cool thing is that I could round out these edges, not make them so sharp, by going on right over here. Many of you probably have noticed that this little shape information text box appears when you click on your model. So that's something, it gives you like information on what the length, the width, the height. Steps refers to the resolution of your model. That's a little bit more advanced and we won't go into detail with that. That is a question for most likely your professor. There's a student that he is saying that I have no idea what to create that will be connected with my writing prompts. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. Okay, so we're gonna change the radius real quick. And you'll notice that by changing the radius, you're rounding out those edges. So I just wanted to round out those edges. Another thing that I could do is change the color. So I click on solid, I could change it to any color that I like. The color really doesn't matter until you're actually 3D printing something. Because what you load into your 3D printer, whatever color filament or plastic that you use, that is going to be the color of your model. The color that you select here, that's more for your eyes and your reference. So I have my base of my keychain. I want to add text to it. So I'm going to scroll over here and find something called text. I'm going to select that. And now I'm going to click somewhere on my work plane. So take a look at this, your information box for your shape. And you're going to go to text and type in whatever text you like. It is a personal keychain, so I'm just going to write, my name on it. Unfortunately, in Tinkercad, it doesn't have a lot of fonts that you can use. It has just very, four different fonts that you can use. So that's the downside of using the text here. Alright, I'm going to make this smaller so it could fit within my, base. So I'm going to grab the little white box, and I'm going to hold shift, and I'm going to uniformly make it smaller. And I'm going to change this color to, green, just for my eyes, to tell the difference. And what I want to do is join overlap these two models. All right. I'm going to need more clarification in your question. The text bar, could that actually be done if we were 3D printing physically? So whatever you create here in Tinkercad, you could actually physically 3D print. I don't know if that is answering your question or not, but yes. So, but if you were just to 3D print the text, you would be 3D printing individual letters. So when you actually get this, the Bianca, if you just 3D print that, it'll be separated. The reason why you use a base is to make sure that everything stays uniform and nothing's flying out. So I'm gonna put my name on this text, on this little square box that I've created, but it's kind of like I don't know where the center of it is. So what I'm gonna do is click on top to view this correctly, and I'm gonna click on both models, the box and the text. And if you go over here, there's something called a line, and you're gonna click on that. And this align helps you align both models to each other. So we're gonna click the center, and we're gonna click the center circle. So these help you align it, center by center. So I've perfectly aligned my base and my name in center to each other. Okay, so how did I get the text on top of the box? I didn't get it on top of the box, actually. So let me exit the align. So all I did is I grabbed the text and moved it within the box. You always have to make sure that your models are kind of within each other. So if my model was too small, for example, if it was too thin, it would disappear. What I did is I thickened the text so I could have it appear on my model. So again, selecting both models, and now I'm aligning it. All right. Now that they're aligned, I have to have a little way to insert the key ring on my model. So I'm going to use another shape, and I'm going to use the ring model. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to use that to connect these two and now get the full keychain. So what's cool with this ring model is that you could actually thicken the ring or change the shape of the ring using the shape information box here. So if I go like this, you'll notice that I'm actually changing the thickness of the ring, the profile of it. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. I'm going to click on the white box and put a dimension. Make it half an inch. And now I'm going to move that model. Have it overlap a little bit. You always want to have your model overlapping to join them. And now that I have all my elements together, what I'm going to do is actually group the model to make it into one solid piece. So one way I could do that is by putting a box around all the components, making sure that they're all selected, and you see this appear. If y'all can see that, this is called the group command. And what happens when you select it is that it groups all the elements together. And to tell if your elements are grouped together, it all turns into one solid color. So I've created a very basic keychain. And you could always separate the model by double clicking on it. Okay? So that's just to get you familiar with like the basics of how the program works and what different types of shapes you can use. But in all honesty, the sky's the limit. You could create anything in the Tinkercad software. We're gonna go over how to create holes in just a second. So let's say, for example, I wanted a different. Okay, how did I flatten it? Here, I'm gonna delete this. Let's say, for example, I wanted a heart, and I'll show you how I flattened it in just a second. So you noticed how it's kind of thick? And you'll notice that there's these white boxes that appear in your model, right? So the white boxes on the sides are your width and length dimensions. And when you grab them, you could change that width and length. But there's one white box in the center. So that is your thickness. And if you grab it and pull it up or pull it down, you could change the thickness and flatten the model. And you'll notice that a number appears too. So you could actually input an actual dimension. So if I click the center white box, go over here, point 2, I could flatten it to 0.2. So, okay, we're going to change up our keychain design and make it into a heart keychain, right? So let's make this model bigger. Let's make it 2.5 in width and 2.5 in length. And I like the thickness. Let's put some text. Let's put I. Let's just put an I. And let's align these two models together. Now it's perfectly centered. And I'm going to get this one, the cylinder. So you'll notice that the top two shapes, they're hatched and they're grayed out. And there's a reason. The reason why they're hatched and grayed out and they're see-through is that they are something called holes. And the hole is in the shape profile of a cylinder. And when you put it on your model, wherever you put it, you're essentially creating a hole. So let's make this hole smaller. And make it 0.5. Let's see. 0.5 and 0.5. Alright, I've made that hole smaller. And I want my hole right there. Alright, and now what we're going to do is group everything together. So make sure everything's selected, create a box around it, and group it together. And you'll notice that we've created a hole in the model. So that's how you remove material in your 3D models in Tinkercad. So when we make them thick or thin, when we print it out, it will be like that. Yes. So whatever thickness that you create, whatever dimensions that you create in Tinkercad, it will essentially print it out. There is one issue with 3D printers. All 3D printers assume that you have modeled your model in millimeters. So, if you modeled this in inches, like I'm doing right now, you will have to make sure that you, in something called a slicing software, so there's a step between having your 3D model and 3D printing, and it's called slicing. So that's when you convert your 3D model into something called G code, which stands for geometric coordinates. That's an easy way to remember that. And you're going to have to make sure that we convert those inches into millimeters before we print it out. But yes, how you model it is kind of how you print it. So that's how you create holes in your models. If you are able to, and if you can, I would recommend that you kind of start creating little things like a keychain and stuff like that to get you familiarized with the program. That's why I did a keychain, because it's a very basic way for me to show you other things. But you could go really advanced in Tinkercad. You could create other things. Like, I think a student asked me to create a water bottle. And I'll show you like one way to create a bottle. So this is where you kind of start playing with your creativity. So I'm just going to get a cylinder. I'm going to change the dimensions. I'm going to make it, let's say, 2 inches wide by 2 inches. I'm going to make it taller. Let's make it 4 inches. That's pretty tall. Alright. So I'm going to grab something called a work plane. And I'm going to put it on top of my model. So what that does is when you're creating more complicated shapes, the work plane helps you like create on the surface you want. Let's see. I'm going to put a ball. How tall is this ball? This ball is 1 inch. Make it 2. And 2. Oh. Gotta increase the height. 2. So line this up. Oh, nope. I want to align it center by center. Shift. Alright, there we go. Escape. I'm gonna... So you see that cone? That black cone? You could grab that black cone and pull your model up or down. So I'm gonna pull it down into my other model. Alright. So I'm gonna group these two things together. Now, I want to create another. Shift. Align that. Let's align. Alright. Let's pull this model. Let's pull that out. let's group these together. I don't want to use that. Let's shift. Line. So, this is my water bottle that I've created. Let's add something on the side of it. So there are other basic shapes actually within Tinkercad. And if you click here in Tinkercad and click the little downward arrow, you could actually go to like text and numbers or characters, and you'll find that there are different shapes that you can use actually still within the program. Like characters, like I could use like, I don't know, a mustache. Let's say I wanted to put a mustache on my water bottle. But right now my mustache is in this orientation. I'm going to have to do something called rotate the model. So what I'm going to do is click it, and you'll see these little like half circles with little arrows. And you're going to click that, and you could actually type in the orientation, or you could grab it and orient it yourself. So now I have my little mustache, and I want to put it like right there. I have to make sure that it comes into contact with my water bottle. Some of it is extruding out. Now I'm going to group my model together. So I've created my water bottle with a little mustache feature. To round out the edges, so when you go to basic shapes, and it's specifically for the box, if you get the box, you see where it says radius? You're just increasing the radius. By increasing the radius, you're rounding out those edges. Alright? So yeah. To get your model always, like, let's say you accidentally have your model in the air. To make sure it's flat within your work plane, you click on your model and hit the D. Like the letter D, and it automatically drags your model back to the work plane. That's a quick helpful trick when you're 3D modeling. So you notice that I created a 3D model using the basic shapes. That's something that you could do. You could start creating. How did the cone get an opening? Do you mean right here? Okay, what I used, we could go, I'm going to control Z. So you see that shape? So that is something called a torus, and that's what I added to the model. to get that little opening. And I grouped everything together. So that's where you see that dip. It's actually another shape. Yeah. So another cool feature about Tinkercad, and I'm just gonna create a new design. So it automatically saved my other design. Is that you could actually use 2D design in Tinkercad. So what that means is that you could actually use something called Autodesk, not Autodesk, I'm sorry, Adobe Illustrator. I don't know if some of you are familiar with Adobe Illustrator. If you are, type yes or type the letter Y into the chat. Like this is like a vector drawing program. Corel Draw is another vector drawing program. Inkscape. Those are the ones I'm most familiar with. But anything, you could probably even use Paint. But essentially, what you could do is use Illustrator, create your 2D design, and make it 3D. So, for example, I use a program called Corel Draw to make something called a scalable vector graphic. And my scalable vector graphic, my 2D design is of an Ursula. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna file, export this, and I'm gonna export it as SVG. Hit export, and there's something in the program that you can use. It's called import. So if you go over here, you could import that file. And it tells you right here, Tinkercad supports STLs, OBJ, and SVG. So we're going to get our 2D design. We're going to choose a file. We're going to choose Ursula. It's too big. We're going to just make it smaller by typing in 1,000 because that's the max is 1,000. We're going to import it. It takes a little bit of time to import it. And that is my 2D design that was made 3D. I'm going to just make it smaller. And there it is. I could also make it thicker. But yeah, so it's kind of interesting. Like, I can make this into a cookie cutter. So I can make my 2D design into something 3D printable. So that's a very interesting feature of Tinkercad. Another thing you could do is probably get an image. But images are tricky. You have to make sure that the image is completely black and white. So, for example, you can't get, let's say I want a sunflower, right? So, for example, I want this sunflower. Tinkercad has a very hard time with color. And I'll show you in a second what that means. So I'm going to get that sunflower image. I'm going to use Corel Draw to make it into an SVG. Because Tinkercad does cannot use pictures. It has to use SVGs. So we're gonna get this image. We're gonna simplify it, make it into like a low quality image, make it into an SVG. But because it's not black and white, it will have a hard time converting those details into 3D models. So let's ungroup this object. I'm just going to delete the background because all I want is the sunflower itself. So that's what I want, my sunflower. I'm going to file, export this as sunflower. And we're going to try to import it. So let's go to import, choose file. Let's choose that sunflower that we created. Make it smaller. And it'll take a while because of the amount of colors that it has. It's always safer to get a completely black and white image. And by that, I mean, instead of that colorful sunflower, you're going to have to do something called a sunflower vector. Misspelled vector. So this is something most likely that the program can recreate. Like something like this. That's what I mean by a black and white image. So let's save that one. Let's go back. It's still trying to import it. Let's give it a little bit more time. But in the meantime, let's work on the other sunflower. So let's delete this one. Let's file. Don't know if we saved that image or not. Yes, we did. Let's convert this into straight up black and white image. Bitmap outline. It's still trying to convert. So that's the problem when you use pictures, and you try to create 3D models of it. It doesn't do a very good job in the software. But there is something called lithophane. So there's another program out there that converts your images into a better 3D, like a 3D printed picture. So there's something called image to lithophane. So this converts your pictures into those 3D printed images that if you hold up against the sun, you could see the full picture. And that's what they look like. So if anyone's curious about how to make a lithophane, I'll give you Mr. Jordan Carswell's contact information, and he could direct you on how to make those images 3D printable. Alright, so finally our sunflower got converted into a 3D model. You notice that it did take a long time, and the image isn't as clear as you want it to be. So that's the problem with using Tinkercad and trying to use these colorful images. It just doesn't do quite a good job. But still pretty impressive. Alright, let's try to use our other sunflower. So we got our other sunflower. We're going to export this as an SVG. Going to name it just sun. Export it. I think I forgot to delete an image underneath. So you'll notice that the black and white image was faster to generate into a 3D model, and it is a clearer 3D model. It's like better, higher quality. So when you do use images, make sure it's like completely black and white, and you'll get a very good 3D model out of it. Another thing that you can do besides import like 2D images is that you could import other 3D models. So, remember that site Thingiverse? You could import a model from Thingiverse. Let's say, for example, Yoda. And I wanted to do this low poly Yoda. What I could do is download this file and modify it. So let's say I go to Thing Files, I go to yoda.stl, and I download it. It's downloaded right here. I'm going to go to Tinkercad. I'm going to import it. Choose a file. I'm going to go to my downloads, and it's Yoda. I'm going to import. And I've imported the Yoda that I downloaded it. And now I can modify this Yoda. Let's say I wanted this cute little low poly Yoda to be a keychain for my nephew. So I could make it into a keychain. I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna rotate it. Pull it up. Move it into my model. Probably pull it up higher. Right there. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm modifying someone else's model. And that's something that you could always do in Tinkercad. You could always obtain a model and modify it to whatever project that you're working on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select both models and group it together. Now I have a model of a Yoda with a keyring attached to it, and I could 3D print this. Alright, so far, those are like all the things that you can do. And there's like more things you could do too. There's another interesting thing within Tinkercad. It's kind of peculiar. It's something called bricks. So it looks like Tinkercad has joined together with Legos. So you could actually, anything that you 3D model, you could make it into Lego form by clicking bricks right here. So if you click that, what it does is that your model is now in Lego form. So you can buy a bunch of Legos and recreate your model. So I thought that was something cool within the program that I didn't know until recently, that it'll Legofy your models. That's something cool. It also converts it into blocks for you. So if you were playing Minecraft, you could export this model into Minecraft. So it'll blockify it and Legofy it. Other cool features of the program. And whenever you click Tinkercad, it takes you back to your dashboard. So are there any questions, comments, concerns?
Well, thank you, Bianca. So students, thank you for being here today. You've got a lot of good ideas about what you can create. Bianca, can you just show us how they would export this to save it, because they're going to need to share it as an image or something like that?
Okay. So this a good question because there's a way you can export this as a 3D model for the 3D printer. And right now, my Tinkercad's a little bit slow. I'll try to refresh it. But you could
I mean, I guess they could
you could
screenshot it as well, but
yeah. So what I recommend students if they are trying to submit this digitally is to screenshot it.
okay.
And because you can export it, and what you can export it as is an STL. If you want to 3D print it, you're gonna have to do that. So if you click STL, it'll export with the whatever name it automatically chose for you or that you changed to. And you could export this as probably an SVG. So if you open up the SVG, this is where it's like a little bit tricky because for 3D models, it doesn't translate well into SVGs. But what you can do is type snipping, the snipping tool, hit new, and you could screenshot what you've worked on. So that is a way for you to like share your work and show your professor what you've done. But again, if you really want to 3D print, you're gonna have to export your model as a .stl. So go to export, hit .xtl, and that is what we need for it to be 3D printed.
Yeah, and it would be, for my purposes for grading right now, I do need a screenshot from you guys, but I think it's a good idea to go ahead and export it as a 3D print so that when the lab is open again, you can go in and print what you've made.
Also, I've done this with the previous workshops that I've done, is that I could... you're not supposed to... You don't download Tinkercad if that's what you're asking.
It's a web-based program, Tinkercad is.
Yeah. I'll... Do you have a Gmail, Susan? Alright, so... Sign in, like, go... Here, I'll sign out. Alright, when you go to sign in, you see where it says sign in with Google? Click that. Oh, sorry. Sorry. I have to sign out of my Gmail. Let's see. Alright, let's try this again. So, sign in. You see where it says sign in with Google, you're gonna click that. No, it's okay. I'm here to answer your question. So, it'll take you to the sign in with Google. It'll ask you to input your account or use another account, and you're gonna type in your Gmail account here. So whatever your Gmail is, and then you're gonna click next. Whatever password you use to get into your Gmail, you type that in. And it should automatically take you to your own Tinkercad account. Like, it'll create an account using your Gmail. So any other questions?
If you have questions for me and you want to jump over to the live room in our Canvas shell, I can do that. So just put in the chat that you'd like to do that if you want any questions with me. Seems like you guys are in pretty good shape.
Yes, and I'll share my info with your professor if you want to like contact me.
Perfect. So I'll post that in Canvas as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Bianca.
No
We
problem.
appreciate you.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for
Thank you for.
participating. Sorry, English not so good. So when you create these 3D models, they're not they're not hollow inside. You can make them hollow inside though. You would have to insert the hole feature inside the model to make it hollow, or there's a 3D printing feature. When you slice it, you could slice a model to be hollow inside. So those are two ways to make it hollow. For whoever asked that. But the model itself that I created, I didn't make it hollow, but I could have. All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much. And guys, I'll post this video when I get it, as well as links to the websites that she mentioned.
Stay safe, guys.
Cheers.